Hello, guys, and listen, welcome to the show. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about the new quantitative easing. Okay, let's start the charts right here. And now here's the thing. I'm going to get right into an article on zero hedge. We're going to pull down here. Fed's quantitative easing relentless. Now, this is the unwind. Now, here's the thing. I've gotten so many people out there now who are thinking that quantitative easing's still going and everything's fine and that the Fed's got their back and the Fed's pumping money into the system. This is what they were doing for years. It's over. It's over. And what we got going on now is something that has what's called an accumulative effect. This means that you don't feel the effect right away. There's been an awful lot of children that have died. Children that have died from alcohol poisoning. What they do is they accidentally get into their father's whiskey cabinet, or they get the key to his cabinet, and they get in there and get a hold of the vodka or something like that, and they get their friends there, and they chug it down. Chug, 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 and then they stand there and they look at their friends and they say, look, I don't feel nothing. There's nothing wrong. Well, you know what happens? The stomach has a layer of mucus around the outer edge of the stomach, and it takes a little while for that to be absorbed through that layer of mucus. Well, that's the way with this quantitative easing. It's taking a little while for the markets to absorb this, for the markets to realize, hey, you know what? The money's been not only shut off, but they're draining it out in reverse. It's an effect that doesn't strike right away. The first 3 months that they did it didn't have little or no notice. It was only 10 billion. So let's take a look here. And it says quantitative easing unwind marches forward relentlessly. During the sell-off, it ignored the whiners on Wall Street. The fifth month of the quantitative easing unwind came to a completion with the release this afternoon of the Fed's balance sheet for the week ending February 28th. The quantitative easing unwind is progressing like clockwork. In other words, for the Fed right now, they are all up. They're all like, yeah, we're getting this done, And they're so in there right now that they're not going to let go easy. Right now, they're like a pit bull who's bit a hold of a guy, and he's chomping in, and he's biting deeper and deeper, and he don't want to let go. And that's what the Fed's like right now with this quantitative easing. They don't want to let go. They got this going, and it's working for them. They feel like the only way they're going to let go is if something really happens that's going to force them to let go. They don't want to let go. And so a little drop in the stock market, remember that 10% drop in the stock market? They didn't let go. It didn't change their course at all. A 10% drop in the stock market, which that's about the stock market was 26,500, so that's a drop of over 2,600 points. Didn't stop them at all. Now that the stock market's rebounded, and Monday, depending on what happens in Italy. There's this Sunday, there's a big vote in Italy, evidently. Depending on what happens, how it'll affect the markets, and I don't think it's going to affect the markets negatively, but it could. It could possibly, but I don't think it will. I think the market has actually oversold itself a little bit at this point. I think the market's in for a boost this week if Italy doesn't throw a wrench into it. Italy could throw a wrench into it come Monday and Tuesday, but then later in the week, it would still boost back up again. The market's ready for a little bit of a boost back up. But never forget what the Fed's doing here. It says, during quantitative easing, the Fed Treasury securities, mortgage-backed securities guaranteed by Freddie and Fannie Mac and Ginnie Mae during the quantitative easing unwind, the Fed is shedding those securities according to its plan. Announced last September, the Fed would reduce its holdings of treasuries and mortgage-backed securities by no more than $10 billion a month in quarter 3 of 2017. So that was October, November, December, 10 billion. Now, they switched to 20 billion a month in first quarter 2018. Well, that didn't come due. That first 20 billion didn't start to come due until the end of January. Well, what happened when that hit the fan in February? The stock market dropped 10% or more. Well, that's the effect kicking in. The effect kicks in when they increase it. Now, they're not going to increase it again to 30 billion to quarter 2, which would be the end of March. January, February, March, the end of March, see? 30 billion. When they do that, we could be in for another big drop in the stock market, or the stock market might hold pat. If the stock market holds pat, then the bigger drop is going to come when they increase it to 40 million in quarter 3. Now, the question is, how long can this hold out with this cumulative effect hitting it? It's kind of like, how far can we go? It's like we're testing the waters to see how deep we can get before suddenly the guy realizes he's drowning. This is basically what we're doing. And the final result would be 50 billion a month by quarter 4, 2018. At that rate, they're going to be drying up liquidity in the system so fast it's going to make your eyes spin if they can get to the 50 billion a month by quarter 4. I don't think they're going to get there. I think it's going to come at 30 or 40. But let's say I'm wrong. By some miracle, let's just say that they can keep drawing 50 billion a month and they get to quarter 4. Oh my gosh, 50 every month, 50 billion, boom, 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 50 billion, boom, boom. Can you imagine how that's going to draw liquidity out of the system and dry the system up? It says this would shrink the balance sheet of treasuries and mortgage-backed securities by up to $420 billion in 2018. Now the Fed's just going like this. Oh boy, we're going to be able to cut back our balance sheet by $420 billion. That's all they see is those numbers, $420 billion in 2018. And they just want this so bad they can taste it. By an additional $600 billion in 2019, and every year going forward until the Fed decides that the balance sheet has been normalized enough. In other words, they're just going to keep going with this until they bust the system. Because do you really believe? Does anybody out there in the world really believe that they can actually take away all of the money that they put in during the whole financial crisis and they can suck that out of the system without it having an effect? Does anybody believe that? If you believe that, what are you smoking? You know? It says the easy part first, Treasury securities. On January 31st balance sheet, the Fed has 24.36 billion of treasuries. On today's balance sheet, 24 billion and 12 billion drop for February on target. Since the beginning of quantitative easing unwind, the balance of treasuries has dropped by 42 billion to hit the lowest level since August 6, 2014. Now look, this basically tells it all right here. Quantitative unwind at work. Federal Reserve Treasury securities, all maturities. Now, you see what happens here? You see how that they were pumping it in on one side back in August 2014, over there on that side of the chart where it says August 6, 2014. You see where the line was going up, 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 up? That was them pumping it in. They're pumping the liquidity in, right? And then see that level line across the top? That's when they stopped. But they were ever so slightly increasing it, even along that line. You see over on the right-hand side of this chart, do you see this sudden drop-off? This is what's going to happen. Now, the effect it's going to have is the exact same thing on all the markets. It's going to be this sudden drop-off. But it's a little bit of a delayed reaction. This is what we're talking about here. A little bit of a delayed reaction. So what they're doing... This is what pumped the markets up, was quantitative easing. And if they remove it and they take it all away, what do you think's going to happen? The markets are going to crash. I mean, this is a no-brainer. But somehow the Fed thinks, hey, you know what? This is great. We're going to get away with this, and I don't know really what they're thinking. I don't know. Do they not think that this is going to cause a market crash? I want to know. Because I know it's going to cause a market crash. Everybody out there knows it's going to cause a market crash. So I guess as long as the market crash hasn't happened, the Fed can say we're being successful. And nobody out there can disagree with them. I can't disagree with them right now. Right now, we haven't had the market crash yet. They're withdrawing the liquidity, and so far, it's working. But I know what's going to happen. It's just that it hasn't happened yet. You know, and that's the way with the Fed. That's why the Fed's able to continue right now, because it hasn't happened yet. So they're saying, look, we've done it. We're the heroes of the world, you know, but it hasn't happened yet. It says in the chart above, the stair-step down movement is a result of the mechanics in which the Fed sheds securities. It does not sell treasuries, but it allows them to roll off when they mature. Mid-month, and at the end of the month, on February 15th, 16.6 billion in treasuries on the Fed's balance sheet matured. On February 28th, 32 billion, 0.1 billion matured. In total, 48.7 billion in treasuries matured, and the Fed replaced 36.7 billion of them with new treasuries via the special arrangement it has with the Treasury Department. This cuts out the middleman on Wall Street, so these 36.7 billion in securities were rolled over. But the Fed did not replace the remaining 12 billion of treasuries that matured. Instead, the Treasury Department redeemed them at face value. In the jargon, these securities were allowed to roll off. The blue arrow on the chart above shows this February move. Mortgage-backed securities are a jagged animal. For February, the plan calls for allowing 8 billion in mortgage-backed securities to roll off. So how did it go? Residential mortgage-backed securities differ from regular bonds. The mortgage-backed securities holders receive principal payments continuously as the underlying mortgages are paid down or paid off. And the principal shrinks until the maturity date, when the remainder is paid off. To keep the mortgage-backed security balance steady, the New York Fed open market operations continually buys mortgage-backed security settlements. They occur 2 and 3 months later. So we're going to see a delayed reaction on this. It says 2 or 3 months later. The timing difference causes large weekly fluctuations in mortgage-backed securities on the Fed's balance sheet. It also delays the day when the mortgage-backed securities that have been allowed to roll off actually disappear from the balance sheet. Explained in this greater detail a month ago here. So they show them where they've explained this in greater detail. As a result, to determine if the quantitative easing unwind is taking place with mortgage-backed securities, we're looking for a lower highs and lower lows on a very jagged line. Also, today's movement reflects mortgage-backed securities that rolled off 2 or 3 months ago. So, November and December, when about 4 billion in mortgage-backed securities were supposed to roll off per month. So you see, this is going to be a delayed reaction on these mortgage-backed securities. But we're already seeing a reaction on this, on the quantitative easing unwind of the treasuries. Now, we're going to see a much more profound reaction here when they switch from 20 billion to 30 billion at the end of March. Plus, they're planning an interest rate hike. This is all cumulative. The interest rate hikes are actually cumulative, too. 25 basis points doesn't sound like a lot, and I've heard a lot of these guys out there, these analysts and stuff, say, oh, it's nothing, it's only 25 basis points. But what they don't realize is the Fed's going to do it over and over and over and over and over again. 25 basis points. And sure, one 25 basis point rate hike is nothing much. But they've already done a number of them, and they're going to do 4 more this year, and it's all cumulative. All of these effects are cumulative, and they're all pointing toward the market not being able to sustain this cumulative effect. It's not going to be, it's simple. It's very simple. And I'll say it right here, and I'll say it again. When the cumulative effect starts to really hit home, a few months down the line from right now, the market's not going to be able to sustain the cumulative effect that they're causing. So either they back off now, and everything will be okay in the markets, or they continue with this. And I'm going to tell you right now, they're not going to back off right now on this. They really want this. And this is why he's got this article here. He says, Fed's quantitative unwind marches forward relentlessly. And it's going to march forward relentlessly. The markets are going to adjust suddenly. This is the problem. This is marching forward slowly and relentlessly. But when the markets finally do adjust, they're going to adjust in a big snap. Then these guys will have to turn this around. When they turn this around, this is the end of the dollar at this point. All credibility will be lost when they have to turn this around. And believe me, if you think for 1 second, when the markets really snap, when we get the big snap, 40% drop in the stock markets, all across the board, everything just falls. You think that the Fed's going to stand there and really say, oh well, the world is shutting down and we're not going to do anything? They're going to do the same thing they did back in 2008. Back in 2008, when they had Henry Paulson running around and everything, and the whole situation was shutting down, and they were running around and they couldn't get the money pumped in quick enough. And they'll do the same thing again this time. You've never seen how fast these hawks can turn dovish when the world comes crashing down around them. Just watch and see. Watch and see how quick they're going to turn dovish. Uber doves is what they're going to become when the world starts crashing in around them. They're not going to stand back and allow this to all turn to mush. It's because that's what deflation would do. Real deflation would turn this whole situation to mush, and they would take the blame for it. And they're not going to let that happen. They want to be the heroes. And so they're going to come in and they're going to save the day. And they're going to be looked at as heroes. They're going to be held up triumphantly. The Fed did it. The Feds did it after they fix this. And that's what I've been saying. We're going to have our real economic recovery then at that point. But that's when the real big trouble starts a few months later after our real economic recovery. But believe me, guys, this real economic recovery is going to feel good. It's going to feel so good to you guys, especially you silver guys out there. Because you're going to see your investment finally go to the moon in gold and silver. And the cryptocurrency guys out there. The cryptocurrencies, that's when they're really going to go to the moon. Everything's going to go to the moon. We're going to have good times for about 4 months. Incredibly good times. It's going to be the real economic recovery we've all been waiting for. And we're going to all be able to thank the Fed for it. Because the Fed, when they reverse this quantitative easing and everything, we're going to have a boom. They're going to throw so much money at this. And there's going to be money everywhere. But that's the time when you got to get, when that happens, you got to hurry and get your money out of the bank and get that after it happens. Because you'll see it happen. When this happens, what I've been talking about, you'll remember what I told you. You'll say, hey, this is what he said. He said that this is all the Fed's going to come out and turn all of this around after the crash. So there'll be a quick, hot crash in the markets. And the Feds are going to rush in to fix it. And then you're going to see the whole thing turn around in an economic recovery, a real economic recovery. And I'm going to tell you, if you stay in cash during that, you're going to lose everything. Because the cash then, after we've had the economic recovery, and we're about 3 or 4 months into the economic recovery, you're going to notice prices going up on everything across the board so fast you're not going to be able to believe it. You're going to go into Walmart, and you're going to think you're in some store in Beverly Hills. Seriously. You're going to go over to the cereal you normally buy, and you used to pay $2.98 for a box, and now it's going to be $9.98. And a month later, it'll be $16.98. It'll be going up that quick. And it's going to be unreal. It's going to be like, what in the heck? But after it goes by for a few months, like that, you'll start to get used to it. The only problem is your wages aren't going to keep up. So then what you're going to notice is your money goes quicker and quicker and quicker. Even though you got good jobs and everything, still it's going to be harder and harder to pay for stuff because you're in a hyperinflation. But there's going to be good times during the first part of the hyperinflation. For probably the first 3 months, you won't even notice it hardly. It'll be good times. It'll be the economic recovery of your dreams, more jobs, more stimulus to the economy. Everybody will be saying how great Trump is. Everybody will be saying how great the Federal Reserve is for saving us. And there will be good times. For the first 3 months, you won't even notice it. The second 3 months is going to start to get a little bit rough because prices will be going up so fast. The 3 months after that is going to start to be hell on earth. Prices are going to start to increase even faster as the dollar even dies quicker. And it's going to probably last another 3 months after that. And those final 3 months are just going to be pure hell on earth. You're not going to believe it, what's going to be happening. America's going to turn into Venezuela in the final 3 months. And then the Fed and these guys are going to have to rush in and save us again. And that time, how they're going to save us, after the final 3 months, after this whole thing's proceeded to the final end, to the dollar's basically dead, then they're going to bring in the cryptocurrency. And they're going to say, you got to convert your dollars over to this new cryptocurrency. That's the point right there where the banks are going to get theirs. Because if you haven't paid back everything you owe to the bank, if you didn't have enough money, you needed that money to live, and that you still owed the money to the bank, and then perhaps you borrowed a lot more because dollars are so, at that point, dollars are going to be so worthless. You have to borrow a lot, and the banks will be upping the amount you can borrow. They'll say, okay, you can borrow more, go ahead, borrow. But then all of a sudden, they're going to switch over to this new digital currency, and the banks will convert what you owe over into the new digital currency. And you'll get trapped at a certain point if you haven't paid them off during the hyperinflation. You'll get trapped, and then the banks will make out great, because then you'll have to pay back in the new digital currency, which will be worth something. It'll have a high value. And you'll have to work ages to try to pay off your loans to the banks at that point, because the banks are not going to lose. They're not going to lose. So at a certain point, if you don't have them paid back, you're going to be in big trouble, because they're going to lower the boom on you. But you'll see it coming. You'll see it coming because I told you it's coming, and you'll say, hey, you know, that's what they did. The banks lowered the boom on us. So if you're not prepared for it and you get trapped by it, you know, you'll owe them forever. You'll be working as a slave for them forever, because they're not going to lose out on the money that's owed them. The banks will make the transition. Now, the government, they're going to make a transition too toward the end of this whole thing. They're going to get themselves out of debt, because as the dollar completely goes down into valuelessness, their debts become less and less and less, easier and easier to pay off. But your debts will be easier to pay off at a certain point too. Get them paid off before the banks transfer it over into the new currency. Because if you wait too long and they do that transfer, then you're in big trouble. So listen, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next show. Bye.